We welcome everyone. My name's Stephen Lester. I'm the science director with the Center for Health, Environment, and Justice. And just a few words about CHEJ. Many of you know us, but in case you don't, CHEJ provides organizing and technical assistance to grassroots groups around the country. We were founded in 1981 by Lois Gibbs, the woman who organized the community at Love Canal in Niagara Falls, New York. And we've worked with literally thousands of organizations since that time. And we're really thrilled today to welcome two of the groups that we've worked for years with, and groups we've had a lot of involvement with. We have three guest speakers today from two groups. Before I get to that, I want to just mention, I forgot to say that everybody is automatically muted when you enter the call. We're going to have our guest speakers talk for 20 to 30 minutes or so. And then after that, we'll open the floor up to Q&A. So we'll let you know when that time comes. We'll ask you to sort of unmute yourself and identify yourself, and then you can get to the questions. Um, I'm very excited about our call today. We're going to talk about organizing, and we've got some leaders who are going to share some of their experiences, share some of their um, ideas on what they did, what worked for them, and and they're here to answer your questions. It's your opportunity to pick the brains of some really great organizers, folks who got involved in these situations. I suspect, like many of you have, because the chemicals came into their backyards, came into their communities, into their homes in some cases, and altered their lives. And so they're not in this because they think it's the right thing to do, although I'm sure they do, but they're in it because they had little choice. The group that's going to go first are the Just Moms from Bridgeton, Missouri, which is just outside of St. Louis. The moms include Karen Nickel and Dawn Chapman. And they came up with this name because they were described as just moms when the government started to have to deal with them. And while they were insulted at that notion, they decided that that they were going to own it and be proud of it because, yeah, that's who they are. And so they're dealing with a radioactive waste landfill, one of the worst, and a landfill that is caught on fire, one of the worst situations I've ever seen. It's really an amazing situation, but they're going to share with you some of their information. I'm going to introduce Jackie too, and then we'll start with Karen and Don, and then go to Jackie. So Jackie Young is from Houston, Texas. She's with a group called the Texas Environmental Health Alliance. THEA is their acronym. And Jackie got involved when she realized she had some health issues and discovered that she was living in the shadow of the San Jacinto waste pits, which is outside of Houston, or actually it's part of Houston. Houston is the biggest city I think I've ever seen or been to. But so Jackie has been addressing this problem for, I guess, I don't know, Jackie will tell you, 10 years, maybe something in that range. And she started just dealing with the problem, and she's grown that into a small group to a larger statewide organization. And she's one of the best organizers, I think, in our network, as are the moms from St. Louis. Karen and Dawn. And that's why we've invited them to be here to share some of that experience and to give you all the opportunities to sort of talk with them and learn from them and ask them questions. So with that said, I'm going to turn the floor now over to Karen and to Dawn.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dawn Chapman, and Karen Nickel is on as well. We are the co-founders of Just Moms STL, and as Stephen so eloquently stated, that title, that name, was kind of used as a derogatory PR slam against us when we were fighting for our lives. And to say we still are, but we did decide to go ahead and just own that because you know what? That's exactly who we are, and there's power in that. And that's all we ever wanted to be. We were forced outside of our comfort zone and our bubble, and our lives were completely flipped upside down when both of us realized that we were living next to a burning radioactive landfill that was a national priority site for EPA and had been for 30 years, but also that it was a site that had not been cleaned up and frankly had not even been stabilized, so that there was radioactive waste sitting on the surface less than a few hundred feet from the fire that had just been allowed to blow around the community that we were living in and raising our children in um, for decades, since 1973. And as Karen will get ready and tell you, you know, as that reality was sinking in for us, and the fact that we lived not even 2 miles from this site, we could smell it. And Karen, the history of the radioactive waste at our landfill that was threatened by the underground fire, it forced us to look at other sites, which were actually right around, and one was right where Karen had grown up. So Karen, I will let you talk about, you know, your childhood and put that other piece together. But I will say, you know, Karen will share her health, the impact to her health, and I will tell you that for me now, it has impacted one of my children and my husband. So.
Yeah, as Dawn mentioned, I actually found out in 2012 that I had all my childhood grew up and played in and around a creek that was highly toxic from radioactive waste material from the Manhattan Project, and had been in that creek, and the government knew since 1949 was allowed to seep into that creek and contaminate the entire length of the creek, which is 14 miles long. And the material that was allowed to seep into that creek was illegally dumped in 1973 in Westlake landfill, which is what the landfill Dawn was speaking about. And I lived for the past 20 plus years raising my own 4 children, 1.8 miles away. So in 2012, when I did learn about this issue, I had already found out that I had several autoimmune diseases and whatnot. And when I found out that the radioactive landfill was on fire, you know, we automatically had to jump into a life or death situation here, because it was considered a potential catastrophic event. The landfill was very unstable and still is. We are under a evacuation plan, an emergency evacuation plan here, where we live and for several miles around the site. We really, you know, didn't have a choice but to react. And we were requesting data from, you know, one of the very first things that we did was reached out to our Region 7 EPA here. We had no idea what a Superfund site was. We didn't understand any of the language they were talking about. We really were self-taught, from learning about landfills to thorium, radium, uranium levels. And we had to reach out to our own Missouri Department of Natural Resources because the state had control of the fire. Feds had control of the radioactive waste. So from the very beginning, we had to coordinate with agencies that had no idea one about the other. And we also had to engage with our fire department because we were talking about a fire that was underground at the landfill that could come to the surface at any moment. We also had to engage right away with our hospital that sits less than a half a mile from the site. We have our school, our high school sits less than a half a mile or right at a mile from the site. So from the beginning, we had to gather up our allies. You know, we had to reach out to our local elected officials and then state elected officials. You know, we were just normal people, just normal moms. You know, this is not what we wanted to do when we grew up, for sure. You know, we just wanted, both Dawn and myself, we just wanted simple lives. We both wanted to be moms and raise our kids and just have a simple life here. You know, we don't live in big, nice houses or drive fancy cars or anything like that. Just going about our daily business. And all of a sudden, as Dawn mentioned, our lives were turned upside down. We had to talk to people that we thought were very scary, you know. And at the end, they weren't scary. They were more scared of us than we were of them. So, you know, organizing is something that you think is this monumental task. And it really is something that you can start just by one person at a time. You know, Dawn and I were looked at like we had two heads when we started talking about these issues. And we, you know, from the very beginning made a pact with ourselves that one, if we felt like either one of us were becoming desensitized, we needed to talk about that, because we couldn't allow that to happen. And two, if we held a meeting, if one person came, we wouldn't feel defeated because that's one more person that knew. We would go to anybody's house that invited us in and we would talk to that person, you know, and then it became, we would be at the grocery store and someone would approach us. You know, so getting the word out for the first, I don't know, 5 years, I would say, was probably the most, it was, we didn't turn down any opportunities, but at the same time, it was very hard.
I think too, one of the things that we did in the very beginning when both of us found out and we were sitting with each other, and I'm so thankful that CHEJ and Stephen and you know, has helped set this up today and all their staff, because nobody knows what you're going through, like somebody either who's already gone through it or is currently going through it. We are all linked. We are all a sort of family, unfortunately. And nobody knows what it's like to sit at a table and feed your kids breakfast and also be advocating to try and save their lives from toxic waste that's either in your backyard or threatening your community or in your water. And so reaching out to CHEJ was critical. And Stephen, I remember I was literally potty training my son when the first time Stephen and I spoke. And I was so embarrassed because I was like, oh my gosh, he's going to hear my son potty training in the background. And Stephen was so kind. And I think that really, I'll never forget that phone call because that actually empowered me. I thought, you know what? Because I think, Stephen, you said something to me. You said this, do not apologize because this has fallen in your lap and you're the one and your family are the ones who are inconvenienced, not everyone else that you're talking to. And I thought, you know what? Damn right. Damn right. I deserved better. And I deserved to be able to just sit comfortably in my house and potty train my kid and not have to talk to government officials. And, but one thing I will tell you about organizing that I know you guys are going to have questions at the end and we want to leave room because Jackie has an incredible organizing history and story. It's hard. It is hard to organize and you really do. You have got to stick to your goals. You have to make short-term goals and long-term goals. And your short-term goals, you can change those every 6 months. But your long-term goals, you have got to hold on to those goals for at least a year, if not 2, because change is possible, but it takes time. And the hardest thing as an organizer, activist, and somebody that lives it is you're scared. You're anxious. This is happening to you. Many of you could be being poisoned at the very time that you're advocating, and you want this fixed now. You need this fixed now. And I will say that is one of the things that we learned from Stephen and Lois and CHUJ is that change is possible, but you can't always get it all at once. And sometimes it comes in a different order. And what you have to do is you have to celebrate every inch that you move towards that change, every little bit that you kick that ball closer to the goal line, that you move that just a little. That is something to be proud of, and that is something to acknowledge within your group. And the other thing that I will tell you that is something that a lot of change makers struggle with, it is something we have seen within our group. It is possible to make great change, but you can't always be seen doing it. A very large percent of the change that you are going to make, should you organize and really keep going and get your goals lined up and figure out who can give you those goals and what you want and target and aim your advocacy, a large amount of the change happens behind the scenes in meetings and conversations and phone calls that nobody ever gets to see. So you can make change, but you can't always be seen making it. And that is hard for a lot of people because there are times when people want to make change, but you also want the recognition that comes with the change. And listen, you deserve it. You absolutely do, because you're trying to save your life and you're working as hard as you can. But, you know, for the sake of change, you're not always going to be able to see it. So that's just something I will tell you. But I think the last thing that I'll leave you with is when you get the change, when the validation comes, it is not going to feel the way you think it should feel, because being right about the things that you're fighting to show the world and get the change you need, these are not things you want to be right about. You don't want to be right about the levels of exposure, right? You don't want to be right about the illnesses that you're seeing and the causation behind them. You don't want to be right about the fact that a lot of times when you organize, you're going to have more information and documents than the regulators at times. And you're going to be sitting across the table with people with big titles that work for organizations who are supposed to protect you. And yet you as a mom, you as an individual, you as a person are going to actually have more information and possibly knowledge and understanding of the problem than they do. And so, it's like, it's earth shattering. It'll break your heart. You know, everybody in every other sense in your life, being right about something feels good. This isn't going to be one of those. And if you don't know that ahead of time, when it comes, and it will come if you fight hard, you will be acknowledged and validated. You can win these things. It will destroy you emotionally. It really will. It will knock you down and it will just tear out your soul. So you have to be prepared that these are not the things in life that you ever want to be right about. So
The last thing I would like to add is just, you know, if you're going to be in a meeting with elected officials or any type of meeting that you're going into as a group, figure out what you're going to talk about ahead of time. Get your script together as if you're in a group. Make sure everybody knows their talking points ahead of time. Stick to that script, because that is the only way that you're going to be able to cover all of the information that you need to cover and get your story heard. It could be that that's the only meeting that you'll ever have to get the chance to do that. So being on script and getting the information out is very important. And it's important that you stay the course. And it's okay to have the good cop, bad cop in the meeting. Dawn and I do that a lot. Um, if it's a meeting that, one of them expects Dawn to be a crazy lunatic and maybe I'm the one that acts that way and she doesn't. And that throws them off. I think that, that's one of the things that we have worked very hard at. We strategize all the way down to where we're going to sit in a meeting. If it needs to be that her and I need to be across from each other so we can give eye signals, or if we need to sit next to each other so I can kick her to behave herself or whatever the case may be. There's a lot that goes into it, and a lot of time that you need to utilize ahead of any type of meeting that you walk into to make it successful.
Yep. And I would say they're going to do the same thing, by the way. The elected officials, whoever you're having a meeting with, is going to do exactly what Karen described on their end. So it is to your advantage to do that, but also work hard on trust. I trust Karen. Karen looks at me and says, we need to do this and it needs to be this way. I don't even ask. She knows.
Same.
We just, you have to have that trust there. And that's going to let you win. So with that, we'll turn it over to Jackie. I'm so excited to hear from her.
Thank you. So much of what y'all said resonated with me, and I wholeheartedly agree. And to just get back to introducing myself following what Stephen said, I live just outside of Houston, Texas. And like Lois Gibbs and Dawn and Karen, I consider myself an activist by accident. I certainly never intended to get into the nonprofit space or being a community advocate. But I am, I'd say, the daughter of an angry mom who, alongside me learned that our environment in a river that I grew up recreating on was actually making us sick. And my mom experienced a sick husband and a sick daughter, and so she was that big angry mama bear. And back in 2010, in May of 2010, I had my first seizure out of nowhere. And I'll never forget that experience or what I went through with seizures. And by 2011, I was averaging about 7 seizures a week and had every test known to man, and doctors could not figure out what was causing my seizures. And so they started coming up with these, notions that, oh, well, maybe Jackie's doing it to herself. And maybe, she's having mental issues. And even when the doctors had observed me having seizures in their offices. And I'm really fortunate to have my mom always advocating for me, beside me, behind me, and really making sure that we got to the bottom of what was going on. And it wasn't just our health, but our animals too were having health problems and symptoms. But, we just didn't think about it back then, that on the days that our animals had certain symptoms and we had the same symptoms, we didn't know any better. We didn't realize, something was eating away at the fixtures in our house, the tap, the faucets, and we just simply didn't know any better. We thought if something was wrong with our environment, somebody would knock on our door. Somebody would send us a letter. They'd let us know, right? This is America. We have the EPA. We have the state agency, which I think, well, many of us in Texas don't really think much of some of the agencies statewide, but, we just thought somebody would let us know. And we learned the hard way that that wasn't always the case. And during those years, I was an environmental science and geology major at the University of Houston Clear Lake. And I was in an environmental management course, and I learned about Lois Gibbs. And I sat there and cried, like watching her as a young mom scream at the government. And I cried, and I had no idea that I was actually living the journey of the Love Canal community. And the next semester, I had a hydrogeology case study. And by that time, my seizures were just going full blown, and still had no idea it could be our environment, and decided to study our water. And come to find out, we found heavy metals in the water. And my professors said, Jackie, that's where your seizures could be coming from. Go get tested. And I had 19 out of the 21 heavy metals in my body that I was tested for. I was in my early 20s. I was like, why? How? There's a lot of industry around in East Houston, but I've never been in a factory. Or thorium. Why do I have thorium in my body? As Dawn and Karen referred to earlier. And I started researching like crazy and learned that a site that I had actually recreated on top of in our river was just sitting there, openly exposed. It was a super fun site. And most of us in the community were not aware of it. So applying the principles I was learning in environmental management in school was that, if it is the environment making you sick, your household is not going to be alone. And one thing that, dawned on me in that time was you don't really get home from a chemo treatment and talk to your neighbors about it. Or, you don't really have a reproductive issue and talk to people in your community about it. And that's something that we need to actually be doing. As uncomfortable as it is, we need to be talking to our neighbors and we need to be talking to people in our communities, because if it is the environment making us sick, we're not alone. And through those conversations, we learned there was a family down the road that had the very same situation as my household, where the daughter was having seizures and the father had multiple myeloma. And both fathers, a very rare demographic for the disease. And so it's so important to talk. And like Dawn and Karen mentioned, if even one person shows up, right, they can go and tell 5 people. So it's really something that's important in community organizing. So in order to do the work of organizing the community and breaking down the technical information for my fellow community members, I knew I was going to have to do this full time. And so I went to work for another nonprofit out of college, which again, studying geology in Houston, that's definitely not the direction you assume you will go when you graduate. And I was able to then see that, maybe that wasn't the best place for this type of work, and started the process of starting Texas Health and Environment Alliance. And we have been a nonprofit for 10 years now, and we're working in multiple communities across our huge county. And we combine grassroots organizing, strategic science, and media exposure. Those are really the big 3 buckets or tools that we have seen be most powerful in these types of movements. And really it all stems from what we've learned over the years as being successful with our work back in my community, which we're still very much working in today. So from that experience, we said, okay, we can apply this to more communities. There's over 20 Superfund sites in our county. Why? Why are we dealing with potential exposures from something someone dumped decades ago? It's just, every part of my body is not okay with that. And so we set out to do something about it. And in the community I come from, the waste site is the San Jacinto River Waste Pit Superfund site. And it was created in the 1960s. And fast forward to when our community really started getting organized, and we secured tens of thousands of positions for a cleanup of that site, which are primarily 2 dioxin pits, one of which is in the river, and a cleanup that would be safe for a child to recreate in the river. And over the years of starting to dig into all the technical, we started realizing that there were major gaps, and things like the ATSDR report saying that there weren't any groundwater wells in the area, so they shouldn't be considered as a route of exposure. But we had a well. So many of our neighbors had a well. So why aren't they even looking at that? And so, having CHEJ or others that can support technically is an important component, but it won't set you free, as Lois says. So organizing the community and building that base of people power was the foundation for when Hurricane Harvey struck our coast. And that was the first time that an administrator from the EPA came here to our town and put their boots on the ground. And at that time, Administrator Pruitt in 2017, he said, I'm not comfortable with how much uncertainty there is at this site. There's barges all around it in the river, and local residents don't know if the flooding from the river brought these toxins to their yards. And he said, I'm just not okay with that. And I had that conversation with him that day at the waste pits because I got a tip the night before. Hey, Jackie, the administrator of the EPA is going to be at the pits tomorrow. Be there. So I stayed up really late and I put together a packet of information for him. I wrote him a letter and put in, the fish consumption advisory that's due to these, largely due to this site, and a variety of other information. And it's important that that is something that we utilize in grassroots organizing, because knowing your target, knowing who can give you what you want, who can make that decision, you also have to recognize that they get briefed on a lot of these things and you don't know what they're being told. So you want to make sure that they know your side of the story and what you want. And so I showed up that day with my packet, and he did, in fact, as the press used to talk about, go around in like this motorcade. There was like a series of black cars that pulled up, and out hops, his chief of staff. And she said, I hear you want to talk to Administrator Pruitt. And I said, I do. And so he got out and came up and shook my hand, and we had that conversation. And when Lois tells that story, she says we're sisters in hostage taking, because she actually did take EPA hostage. I think I would have gone to jail if I totally took him hostage, but today. But no, I showed up. I put my car like right on the road where they didn't have a choice but to recognize that I was there. And that's important, showing up. And so sometimes you're not going to get a tip like that, but you might know your target and then research, put notices on Google Alerts and find out where they're going to be and when are they coming to your town, and show up. I had a longstanding joke with the former region administrator for EPA, which our region is Region 6, and they're in Dallas. And anywhere he was in like the Houston vicinity, he knew I was going to be there, and I was going to have a manila package, a manila folder with his reading material, the latest press stories, any studies, a letter to him. And I was going to get that in his hand, no matter where he was. And so we had a joke that I was going to show up with his reading material for the flight back home. And it's little things like that that really build up and create that momentum that is so important for these types of movements. Another thing that I would say is to always think 2 steps ahead and to think outside of the box. One thing about press and using press as a tool in this type of work. One is for accountability, and something that press loves, we know, is a visual. And, there was a community meeting where the EPA came to town. They had a public meeting in our community, and the EPA is designating the dioxin waste at our site, despite it being the 2378 TCDD, the most toxic chemical ever created by man. They're designating it as non-hazardous. And we gave all of the audience magic wands. And I said, okay, when I go up to the microphone and I say, unless the EPA is magic and they can turn dioxin waste into non-toxic substances, and made some statement like that, and everybody was holding up their magic wands. You have a magic wand, EPA? And the press loved that. And so thinking about things like that, like what can you do to draw interest in the press, but also make a statement, because that statement to the EPA was in part that we're organized. We're all agreeing on this. And also, on the accountability end, one time we were in a meeting, a private meeting. I was the only non-elected official in the meeting, and the EPA, what project manager was about to say something about the damages a storm had caused to our site. And one of the EPA guys put his hand up and said, whoa, Jackie will have it on the cover of the Houston Chronicle tomorrow. Be careful what you say. And so they knew that that was 100% true, and that the press was already alerted and going to be waiting to hear what we learned in that meeting. So definitely use that to your advantage. And there's so many different types of press these days that, can help you, and just all of these unconventional sources to help get the word out. Um, Going to the health, and that's a very important component to overlay, and like Dawn and Karen with just moms, and Lois Gibbs being told the health study that she and her fellow neighbors did was a bored housewives study. Nothing is more important than local knowledge. So there's a time for emotion, and there's a time for the reasoning and the facts. And my mom is definitely that emotion, and then I follow in with the facts. And in our community, we had to basically scream at the state health department and the EPA for years, begging them to study our health. We said there are 3 households of children in a row, neighbors, with the children diagnosed with lupus. Like, this is not normal. And, a married couple with multiple myeloma, they don't share genes. Like, this is not normal. And eventually the state did study our health. And in 2015, they published their first study. And it gave us more than we bargained for. They found numerous types of cancer and abnormally high rates. And, one in particular strongly linked in medical research to dioxin exposure was retinoblastoma, and that was over 16 times the state average. If you are working to get a health study, I encourage you, if you don't have an expertise in that area, to consult with people who do, like Stephen, because there are a lot of nuances in these studies that can hide things. And so, one example is the study area. And most recently, we worked with the state health department to do an updated study. And we asked them to study 65 census tracts, which is a huge area. And I won't go into the background of why that area, but a huge area. And we wanted the study broken out per census tract, so we could tell, if one community has higher rates of cancer than another, or than the state average. And what they did instead was they studied the cancers we asked for and the timeline we agreed upon, but they only gave us the data for the whole area, which is 250 square miles. So I thought, you know what? This data is startling. They found leukemia, lymphoma, lung, bronchus, and cervical cancers at abnormally high rates in this area. That's what we're leading with. The state health department just designated 250 square miles a cancer cluster. That would have been a smaller headline if maybe they had diagnosed like a town of 8,000. But they declared a whole 330 plus thousand people, 250 square mile cancer cluster. So look for things like that, also that can be a bit unconventional. And the last thing I'll say is just to always have confidence and security that you do have a right to be wherever you are, where you're showing up, and to be involved. And the confidence, I'll never forget when I first started accepting that I have to start a nonprofit. There's nobody else doing this work here. I need to do this. And I walked into a meeting where I was hoping to go meet some potential funders. And I walked in and it was all old white men in suits. And I was like 25, and I literally turned and walked right back out. And I went out in the hall, and I had to collect myself and like talk myself up and say, Jackie, you deserve a seat at this table. You deserve to be here, and your community needs you to get back in there. We all put our pants on the same way, get back in there. And I did. And I ended up securing one of our largest early funders in that meeting. And so always just, lead with that, and knowing that you certainly deserve to be there and advocating for your community. Stephen, thanks.
Thanks, Jackie. That was great. Thanks, Dawn and Karen. I think you guys have really shared a lot of great suggestions, ideas, thoughts, and I got a little personal comment about I love strategic science because that's how science fits in, and that characterizes it really well. All right, so let's open things up to questions now. You guys on the call here today have heard these young ladies and talk about their work and their experiences. Now it's your turn to ask some questions and maybe explore and some ideas that these ladies can help you with. So raise your hand or just come off mute and introduce yourself. I don't know, Karen, Sharon, are there any questions?
No, there are no questions in the chat, so they can raise their hands and come off mute.
Okay.
Let's see.
I don't see any hands yet. Come on, guys. Gotta have some questions.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Elizabeth, yes.
Yeah, hi. I'm curious about how we proceed with the current administration, and the dismantling of the EPA. Um, and if you I live in a red state, I live in Arkansas, so there's not a lot of support for any environmental issues. How do we proceed in this particular environment? That's my question.
So Karen and I, this is Dawn, from Just Moms. Karen and I just met with the head EPA administrator, Lee Zeldin, yesterday. He came out and visited our site. And one thing I will tell you, so getting the press were invited, and it was a very small roundtable, and there were impacted community members. We were there and some stakeholders, very similar to the meetings that Jackie is describing, where sometimes we're the only people in the room that are not elected officials, right? But we insisted that the press be included or that we would not attend, which would deny them the photo op, right? That they so desperately need. So you can play off of, I hate to say it this way, but why are they visiting the site? Why are they concerned? And then while there, your relationship with the press, get some strategic questions, because we were able to get him on the record with cuts and spending. And well, you care so much about the site and you're worried about this community. How are these cuts? How are you going to make sure that EPA can regulate and protect them while doing this? And it forces them on the record with whatever issue you're dealing with, around your area. But the second thing, so you're in Arkansas. So is that Region 7? Does anybody know? I think that might be Region 7, right?
I don't know exactly.
EPA.
I'm in Northwest Arkansas.
Okay, we'll look that up, but I think if you're trying under this administration to get THEA, the regional administrator of EPA in your particular region, then I think honestly, you reach out to people like us and other people with other sites and see if anyone has a connection and can help use their platform to highlight your issue and what's going on and get you in front of your RA. Or if they can use like we can maybe help with this too, and I know Jackie can probably help if we can quietly reach out to some of our media resources, right? Our friends that we have made throughout, the decade plus we've all been doing this, and see if we can get somebody to run one story and then see if we can send them to this EPA, to the administrator for a comment. Because one thing that forces them to do, even if their eye isn't on you, and even if they go off, even if they decide not to give a comment, it helps make them aware that there's an issue that they could be asked about, right? If they're anywhere near that. And then Jackie's suggestion also, if you have the resources, to put out a Google search on where either the RA or anybody's going to be within your vicinity, within driving distance, because they are going to be out doing talking and doing PR and doing photo ops, to have somebody there. And even if it can't be you, there's 31 participants on this call, and I'm sure, Stephen can help connect anybody, Stephen and Sharon can see if you can get, if he's going to be in the area, one of us to maybe ask a pointed question if we can drive and be there about your site, because it puts it on the radar, right? And their aides and everybody standing around them is going to be quietly getting on their phone and doing a quick Google search. So, but these are some ways. But I think that this administration has to have a win. They have to show somehow that whatever they're doing policy wise, it's helping, it's saving lives, it's doing something and not hurting people. And so these are the ways, you know, to get them on the record to do that.
Arkansas is in Region 6.
Okay. We may have a contact, so we'll connect after and let me see what we can do to help.
And I would say too, as a fellow organizer in a red state, you know, early in you know, doing this work, it was a goal that we set out on as a nonprofit, right? To gain bipartisan support for what the community wanted. And so at the end of the day, if your decision maker is an elected official, or the EPA, you know, your community is their constituency. And so that's important to be able to use people power. And I would, you know, go to meet with a state representative because I needed him to sign that letter to give to the EPA that he supported what the community, what his constituency wanted. And people said to me, "Oh, Jackie, don't. He owns a construction company and he's suits and boots and don't go talk to him. You're wasting your time." And I was like, no, this to me is about like our basic right to live in a safe environment, and it's their responsibility. And so, as drawn out as the process takes, and as much as they try to get around these types of things, I went and I talked to him and he signed on with us. And so when you're talking with whoever your decision maker is, it's important to understand what they care about. So do a bit of background, do a bit of research, and talk to them at an angle that is catered to what they talk about or what they care about. And then I see there's a hand up. So the last thing I wanted to say, you know, I love this and I think that it is fitting for this. But the statement, optimism is not an absence of fear, it's the refusal of despair. I think that's very much like where we are right now with the current state of the EPA and what's going on. We still have to have hope and optimism because at the end of the day, they are the ones that can make the decision.
Yes,
The other
Jim
thing,
has his hand up.
Thank you. Hopefully you can hear me. I'm part of a group that's been fighting a landfill for 28 years. My question is, I mean, we're involved in litigation, but we're going to run out of time in the next year or two. But my question is, a lot of our members have been in this a long time. They're retired. They've been retired. They're tired of being retired, you know. And we're having. I've been trying. I'm like one of the youngest people in the group, and I'm in my mid-50s, you know. And we need to get some younger people involved. But we're having a hard time doing that. If you had one best suggestion for how to get people your age, you know, young parents, you know, and so forth, involved, what would that be?
do your local high schools or even colleges require community service hours?
Yeah, I don't
Because
know anymore. Yeah, they might. So
I
communities.
was I think just search for that because I really think that we've been able to pull in some youth through that. But I also think one of the other things that we do, because yeah, it is, I hate to say this, okay, but yes, definitely get somebody, if it's not you, somebody else who can get on TikTok. Offer them a way to use the skills and the things that they're interested in already. Because I know a lot, I'll just be honest, a lot of the kids that we know, maybe they are interested in this, maybe they care, but they also want followers. So I think everybody is looking for an issue to do something legitimate on, right? So offer them that option and say, hey, you know, would you be willing to maybe show up to a small meeting or whatnot and do, you know, a couple photographs and do a TikTok and we can share it or something like that. Get them involved. And I think that could work out as well. But I think also if you are in a red state, we're in a very red state, Missouri is too, you know, reach out to maybe local youth groups and things like that that need to do certain amount of things in the community or whatnot, and just see where you can get your foot in the door. But that is a very hard thing. And I think that there's so much going on right now that's traumatic and scary for the youth that it is hard to get them to do what you have done and a lot on this call probably have done, and is pick one issue to make their advocacy around.
Thank you.
One of the things that the younger generations really care about is climate change. So if there's an angle there with climate change, but we certainly struggle with that as well. It is difficult to break into. And, like tomorrow, our staff is going out and doing fish consumption advisory with about 12 local college students. And so if there are any colleges in the area, junior colleges, universities, you can always see if they have festivals or something you can table at and try to get plugged in with some of their like civic leadership or environmental type classes with the professors, because they can be a really great ally to help get the word out about your meetings. And there are a variety of professors here actually in the Houston region that will give our meetings as an extracurricular or extra credit type event that their students can go to. And then once they come and they hear about what's going on, oftentimes they feel compelled to stay involved.
Great. Thank you.
Zuline from Mayfield she has her hand up.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm Zelene Mayfield, the chairperson of Chester Residents Concern for Quality Living here in Chester, PA. And I want to respond to one of the questions that Jim asked. How do you engage the youth? It's hard. They got a lot of distractions. However, it can be done. And I'm going to tell you why I know that to be a fact. We have an organization called Campus Coalition Concerning Chester. And we call them C4. C4 is comprised of different college campuses based out of Swarthmore. So a Swarthmore, Haverford, Bryn Mawr, Villanova, at times Penn or Drexel, and every now and then Widener, who is actually in Chester, they will join that organization. Their mission is one thing, to assist us on what we need to do. They are college students. This thing has been going on for years, but what I have found is that when working with them, they are hard to manage, but they're students. But you got to give them the levity to own their own projects. They do their own social media. They help with ours. They engage. They do skits. You got to tap into what it is that they like to do, and they will be eager to do it. We have a research team there. We have social media. We have a videographer, a young man who his passion is photography. So we've given him that task. Every event, everything we do, that's his job. But we also have a group called Choices. Choices is the Circle Youth Environmental Leadership Group, 8 to 18. Um, they've been formed for 2 years. And they show up at every meeting, every community event, everything. We teach them, we're training them about the environment, about environmental justice, about their community, what they can do to make their community beautiful. They wanted to deal with gun violence. We did a workshop on that. We had PA ceasefire in, but we also had a local gun interventionist come in and speak to the children. We do conflict resolution, but it's got to be things that they like to do. And the motto is they have to do a training, then they have to do an event or a community service, then they get to pick something fun. like a movie or Dorney Park or Hershey's, but it can be done. Choices has been around now for 2 years. Are they hard? Absolutely. They're the worst of the worst. But you also, we give them stipends. But I think that their involvement is because they know that they own choices. Choices is theirs. We're not there to tell them what to do. We are there to guide them. And I think that if you really give them the runway and a capacity and put a little bit of finances behind it, they will be involved. Because honestly, our kids really need something to do outside of putting their head down on these phones. So if you guide them, they'll come. And, it's been a challenge since school started, but when school is out, we meet every Wednesday. And every Wednesday, these kids were showing up.
We
At
have
different
one more.
times because some of them work and go to school too. So that's problematic. But you stay encouraged. You got to keep kneading the dough, as they say, until you find the right combination. But be
We
encouraged because the youth desperately need our guidance.
we have one more question from Okaho. You have your hand up.
Yes, I do. My name is Okoro Ene from Peace Point Development Foundation. I just want to contribute on how we engage the youth in our own local area, which in Nigeria, the Niger Delta, where we work. In our own effort of engaging the youth, we do it through building, having school clubs where we engage with them, build their capacity, and also carry out quiz, annual quiz competition among the school club members in different schools in the Niger Delta. We also have community club that is engaging with out of school youth also, where they carry out an intervention. They become the community ambassadors on environmental justice, and these are happening mostly at the oil and gas producing community and forest community, where we have a lot of issues around there. And engaging with them, we also be in Nigeria. What is really reigning is the remote job. So we engage them through having remote campaign, and from there you give them a stipend, because the remote job is now what the youths are really engaged, and they even want to go diabolical. So how do you take them away from engaging in the diabolical way, just sitting down in the house? Is through the social media campaign. That is what we do at our own level there. But I still want to request, when deaf will have opportunity to include Nigeria in their program. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank-
you, Stephen.
Yep. Well, thank you all for being here today. I want to mention one other thing before we sign off, and that is CHJ has some organizing materials on our website. We have an organizing handbook. We have a leadership development handbook. That the leadership handbook actually was written by Lois, and it's her story of going door to door and how she started her group and what she went through as a mom who had no experience walking down this road. So it's written in her words and through her vision at the time, and it's really a fascinating piece. Uh, uh, so anyway, those are both on our website under leadership and organizing. Um, Thank you, Dawn. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Jackie. Your involvement today and your stories and advice, I think, were terrific. All of you on the call, if you have further questions, you can always come to CHEJ, and I also encourage you to reach out to our speakers if you have follow-up questions. I'm sure they'd be happy to help you and spend a little time with you. So thank you again, everybody, for being here. We'll continue our series. Our next month, we have a lady from Texas, Ron, I'll never get her name right. Ranjana.
Ranjana.
She's dealing with fracking in the Dallas area, and she's going to tell some stories, and I'm sure you'll find her input interesting as well. So thank you all. Thank you very much, and we will send out the recording of today's call to everybody afterwards. We'll probably send that out in a day or two. So again, thank you all for being here. Appreciate it very much.
And the next meeting is, the next training is scheduled for Tax Day, April 15th.
Yes. Our
Thank
schedule.
you.
That's right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Don.